A guest in studio who is a pastor, a counselor, a former sportsman, and many other things that he has done across the world of life. And of course, he has worked with huge brands such as Toyota and BMW. And of course, today we have the privilege of having him here on ZTN Prime on the Morning Rush. And his name is Kudzai Shoko. Pastor Shoko, I shall call you today, or Pastor Kudzai. Which one works better?
Kudzai is fine.
Kudzai is fine?
Yeah.
Fantastic. You want to stay young. I like that. So I understand you're a sportsman, former sportsman. What sport did you do?
I had the privilege of playing cricket, hockey, represented part of it here in our country. So I was really blessed to have had that opportunity.
Okay. You played cricket as well. I played cricket at some point.
Yeah, well, we all get an opportunity in the previous schools that we went to, so we're blessed in that regards.
Fantastic. Before we get into our actual interview, I just want to get your thoughts and pick your thoughts on the issue that is currently happening, that we're currently talking about here on ZTN Prime. Should we legalize abortion or not? What's your take on that one, Pastor?
You know, I stand guided from my belief and my conviction. Which is the Word of God. And it's premised on three things. What's God's intention regarding that in terms of women and men? What is God's divine design? And what is the purpose? Whenever we violate that, we are subject to two things: abuse or being abused. And those are the questions that should conscientize us in the decisions that we need to make.
Okay, so the pastor there just swerving away from the question, answering it very diplomatically, but the moral fabric of this particular community. What does it say? What do you guys think? Get in touch with us on our social platforms. Let's get talking. We'll be hopefully reading some of your messages here about that particular law. Do you think it should be enacted or not? Coming back to our interview here, Pastor Kudzai, the first question that I would like to ask you, it's Women's Month, right? And you are an advocate for positive masculinity, I must say. You deal with men. And of course, you know, the motivation around that and all the confines that make up a man. And looking at this month, what's the most practical way that men can actively use to empower and support the modern woman?
Well, in celebration of the month, I think we need to become more aware and be educated in and around these issues. I think there should be zero tolerance for misogyny. There should be zero tolerance for chauvinism, and we've got to address the disproportions in and around patriarchy. It tends to have a bias towards male, and so we have got to address that. And again, premising it on, for me, from our convictions is, you know, the Creator, what was His design? I think we've got to become inclusive. We've got to let our guards down to be able to incorporate and to coexist with women. Male and female are two components that create a whole. And so when God created both male and female, He made women as helpers. So there is enough room in the world that we live in to be able to coexist.
Very interesting that you say that the part of helpers, and I also think we also have to play that supportive role as men, positively influencing women, and of course doing away with all these things to do with misogyny, patriarchy, and the fabric around negative masculinity, as we put it. So some say empowering women doesn't mean disempowering men. How can men and women work together, obviously, to create a balance and a supportive system to one another?
Well, empathy for coexistence, looking out for the purposes of our women. God created them with something, and I think our support is to find out what that is and support them. So, for example, my wife and I, the real central premise is I'm trying to find out what God has put in her, the treasure in her, that so she's able to live out her life, and I'm that support role. And likewise, on her side as the helper, she's finding out what God has put in me, and she's looking at how do I achieve that. So that coexistence, that sharing that space equitably, and also supporting unconditionally. Yeah.
Unconditional support is what we all need at the end of the day. And of course, now looking at the workplace, the community, and the various areas where our minds, our bodies, our souls meet. Mm-hmm. How best can we positively impact other women who are not necessarily in our lives directly at the house or at the home or at the household level? What is it that we can do as men generally to support, just to come from what you just said there?
Well, I go back to inclusivity, and I said earlier the issue of dealing with misogyny, and the whole issue of men dominating, supremacy, and it should be selective, because sometimes we give the impression that we're allowing them into the space, but it's selective. It's only, and we talk about percentile. We've increased the quota system on women leaders in, say, in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But we're selective. Certain areas is no-go area.
Yeah.
It becomes chauvinistic.
We want to maintain
all boys club,
status,
and I think that has to, eventually fall away. I think we're on a trajectory towards it, but we're still quite a long way away.
Yeah.
And we should be allowing. No one should be prejudiced because of their gender, in terms of in the workplace and even in the homes. The shows that we share. Yeah, and I think it goes back to how we taught when we start off as toddlers. And if we miss that integral part, we've got to play catch up somewhere. Yeah. And so we've got to go back to God's divine design in terms of what does it mean to integrate both parties into it.
Well, you talk about the boys' club in particular, because now this is something that's very interesting, and that's where you see then we start having words like feminism or feminists who are really coming out to try and show their space or claim a space, as it were. What is one way that perhaps is outdated in your view of being a man or being manly?
I think chauvinism. That's outdated. It just doesn't have any space for where we are. And sometimes it happens inadvertently because we haven't been taught well. I only became more aware of it much more into my teens. And when you do get married, you realize, something's wrong. And then you have to find the source of information, source of knowledge, understanding what God's wisdom is regarding these matters.
Yeah.
What insights that we need, what understanding that we need, and what revelation knowledge in terms of how do I deal with my wife, for example. This is God's daughter. The way I'm doing this, am I heavy-handed with domination, supremacy? If God were to stand and say, hey, what's happening here? Is she a doormat or is she a partner? So we need inclusivity, we need coexistence, we need to be more aware, and there's got to be that education in our systems, whether in the workplace, in the home, and in society in general.
Well, in case you're just joining us here on The Morning Rush, we are talking to Kudzai Shoko. He's a pastor, he's a counselor, he's a former sportsman, and of course, he's a man. And he's talking about positive masculinity here on The Morning Rush. And of course, we are discussing various issues of how to support the woman. This is March, the Women's Month. And of course, on the 8th, we were celebrating International Women's Day, and lots of activities that were happening. Also, the He for She programs that are happening in the country. Lots of activity around how best we can support the women. And we're doing our bit for society as ZTN Prime. And of course, Pastor Kudzai, you can't be a man, really, well, a fully fleshed man, if we don't talk about fatherhood. What's one, maybe, parable, story, or verse that you can pick up for us that, signifies being a fully fleshed good father?
Well, I'll pick a verse from Proverbs 22, verse 6. You know, it talks about, I hope I've got the reference right. It talks about train a child in the way that they should go, so that when they grow up, they'll not depart from it. And the reason is specific. You know, fatherhood is not some testosterone zone. It's a shared responsibility that has, it's a portfolio that has responsibility for headship over the family. So it's inclusive. So we need to find out where the source of this information is. And unapologetically, that's why I say we need to go to God. I mean, you imagine this universe, God fathers 8 billion people at any one go. I think as a source of information, I think that's where we need to go.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So I'm confident with that because he's the one person who carries an entity of being omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. I don't know any other grouping or any other individual that has that capacity. And also, he is the father heart of God. How does he deal with us? And I think we should reflect that in our families, and also we should reflect that to our spouses and to our children. That, you know, a man is born as a man, but the fatherhood portfolio needs to be taught. We have to be trained. So what is it that we be trained? We can't be trained some other people when we haven't been trained ourselves. So the source for me would be the Word of God, His instruction in terms of what it is to be a father.
Very interesting perspective there. Fatherhood is such a bliss.
Yeah.
You know, and as a young one, there's been a lot of learning, lots of mistakes, I think, you know, but they don't see the mistakes, these young ones. They just need that father. At least the presence is the first thing that should be there. And of course, as you speak, the spirituality aspect is very, very critical. And I guess that will be the source. You're very correct there. And obviously, right at the back of that, what's one superpower that you would attribute to men that we definitely are underutilizing?
I think headship.
Headship.
Taking responsibility. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, and it's something that we need to consciously be aware of.
Yeah.
And, you know, go out there. You know, headship is the responsibility to lead, not to overload yourself and be authoritarian in terms of just heavy-handed, but understanding, being educated based on what does it mean to make sure that a family, a unit called family, is able to accomplish the plan and the purpose of God for each and every individual in the family. And we have to be more positive. We need to be very much aware and understand it's just not being the guy who has the seat in the room. That's daddy's chair. He's going to be
I love the chair.
We all love the chair.
I've got my own chair at home, and it's got a very nice branding of my totem. So, yeah.
So I think with it comes inconvenience. And I say inconvenience. Anything that requires help, anything that requires responsibility has got an element of inconvenience. And we need to incorporate that as a lifestyle. You know, fatherhood is not something, it's a lifestyle for a lifetime. As long as we're here, we never stop doing that. And it's got to be expressed in unconditional conditions, which is love for everyone. So there's sacrifice in terms of it. Yeah.
So somebody says the only things that are loved unconditionally are probably your kids, dogs, maybe women, as in wives.
Yes.
A man is always loved conditionally. He must provide, he must give us security, he must, you know. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that from a man's perspective. How can you help guys cope with these daily pressures of providing? In its totality, really, you know, perhaps not just financially or materially, but in its totality. But there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, and we don't talk as much as we should, I think.
You know, over the years, I've begun to realize that there isn't so much said about the man being the provider as much as saying God is the source. And I think we're beginning to see it in the modern world where women are earning more than men.
Of course.
Okay. But the idea is that the blessing that flows within the family, God doesn't necessarily have to choose that it will come through the man, it could come through the woman, but it's getting the understanding of what our roles are and what the purpose of the resources that come into the family. And that's why we've got to understand each other in terms of what are the responsibilities. Yes, the father or the man is the final authority, but if resources are coming in, it shouldn't prejudice anybody in the family. I think what the pressure is when men feel they're not able to provide, then they think the bottom is falling out. Then
Hasn't it though?
Not quite. And when the woman is now ascended into a position, she's feeling the pressure like, I'm looking out for this family. There's a strain on this. But if you really look at the equation and you bring it together and said, well, these are shared resources. Why would God bless you? Because he says to us, the first words that God ever spoke to us, they were not prejudicial. They were not selective. It was not saying it would be the husband that would be blessed. And he said, and he blessed them. Then what did he say to us? 5 things. He said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue, and to dominate. That overlaps into even our helpers. So we should take advantage of this. And because there's unconditionality of love in that, is to say, listen, babes, this is for us. And so we've got to migrate from a certain thinking and understanding. That's why I keep going and say, what's God's intention? What's God's divine design? And what is his purpose? And the purpose is that God wants us to procreate and fill the earth because he wants a large family.
But how can we positively support that imbalance, as it were? From a man's perspective, it's definitely imbalance for a woman to be right at the top there. Yes, it's one thing for us to sit here and talk about supporting women, but the practicality of it is in those fine details. How can a man really stand and support his partner who is actually ascending, maybe career-wise or business-wise? They are bringing in the bacon, as it were, and perhaps the guy is not really as high as the woman in terms of that material, setting, which unfortunately the society has viewed as the main thing.
Deflate the ego. Okay, be supportive of the good thing that's coming in, and as it doesn't take away your role of being the head of the family. Headship is about responsibility. Headship is meaning that we coexist, we function, and we are able to achieve what God has placed in us. I was laughing. I said to my wife, if she was to become a president or whatever, and she was going to make so much money, I'm going to enjoy the money. Because it's for us.
As much as you can.
The issue isn't about who's doing whatever it is. The issue is understanding what's the divine purpose that God has. Yeah. Why did God create family?
What's the assignment?
What's the assignment?
Yeah.
Okay, so we work together. So when we create silos, it creates conflict. Okay, so we're going to have the conflict, but we should be mature enough to be able to sit and say, hey, how is this thing working out? So each unit is different. It's unique, just like our fingerprints. Nobody has the same set of fingerprints. So your circumstances in your home are going to be different from mine. But we can work out our home based on the wisdom, the insight, the understanding, the revelation knowledge that we have for our home. But we can make it work. But if we are, ego and we've been taught not so well, and we think what's the purpose if telling your wife who's doing so well, no, come and sit home, look after babies and everything, and that's your job, that's your lot. Now I want her to flourish. I want one of the reasons why I married her was to get to help her to achieve what God has put in her. I'm supporting God's mission in her, and likewise she's supporting my mission. So we have to change the paradigm. The thinking has got to change.
Well, to my wife, please go ahead and be the best that you can be. I'll focus on the money. Okay, I'll spend it. We are talking to Pastor Kudzai Shoko, sharing some nuggets here about positive masculinity. How best can men support women in this beautiful month of March, where we are commemorating and recognizing the role that women have played in our lives in general. And of course, we are just going to give the good pastor a parting shot, and we move on with our programming right here on Morning Rush. Pastor, your last words.
Great for women. We want to let you know that we are supporting you. We want to, not just supporting, but we are integral part. That God's divine design is to be in your lives as much as you are to be in our lives. And I want to just say something for particularly the young ladies.
Yes.
Not to wait for a suitor to say that if I do get a suitor, then God will bless me. No. To go out and buy that house, buy that car, do everything that you need to do, and enjoy the blessing of the Lord. It's not limited to you being in a covenant of marriage. And I think women need to be encouraged to flourish and become everything. You know, there's neither male nor female when we go to heaven. You know, we're just souls. We are spirit beings. And to encourage them to really, you know, do everything that has been invested in them, and not to fall short because they feel, you know, the pressures or the pushback of misogyny and chauvinism and the disproportionate issues in and around patriarchy, particularly in social, political, and even inheritance. We always look at the boy child and whatever it is. I think we've got to scope that and change that, that it should give equal opportunity, but also be able for them to be able to accomplish everything that God has invested in them. Women are precious. Everyone here has come through the pathway of a woman.
Absolutely.
Even God, when he brought Jesus Christ,
It's the same way.
he didn't approach a man. He went to a virgin called Mary.
Okay.
And the way we men, we treat our people. Let's know, to the young person who's looking to date and everything, if you're not going to marry that person, just remember that's potentially somebody's wife. Treat them with respect, treat them with dignity, and treat them with honor. Thank you.
Well, those are the words there, wise words from the good pastor, Kudzai Shoko. He's a counselor, he's a former sportsman, he's done lots of things. I was going to ask you, though, your experience there with Toyota and BMW, what were you doing with them?
I was subcontracted to do a lot of soft skills.
Okay.
So I would, you know, train in and around sales, sales leadership, sales teams, part leadership, and a lot of this, you know, listening skills and things like that. So it's helped me kind of augment my world to understand the nuances of life a bit better in terms of that. So that wasn't on the technical side. That was more just the...
I thought it was on the technical side. It was maybe something to do with Formula One. You never know. Right, talking about that, so you've seen that Lewis Hamilton has switched from Mercedes to switch back to Ferrari. That's going to be very interesting. We'll see how that Formula One season will finally kick off and do things. ICC Champions Trophy, India blistering against New Zealand. Your take on that one, Pastor, before I let you go?
I think there's a lot of intake with that tournament. India basing in one environment, I think having substantial advantages over the other countries, and I think there's a bit of hoo-ha, complaints and that, but also they're the superpower. I mean, they make the bacon. Yeah. So I think everybody is kind of tiptoeing on eggshells in how you comment. But obviously the skills and the what was on show, showcasing some of the talents, is just gone, you know, so much higher for entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I think the way it's migrating, it could come to playing the best of the best. So it may not necessarily be country to country. You know, I foresee a time where they'll pull the top say 100 players, and then say, okay, you're franchised to Zimbabwe, you're franchised to Sri Lanka, you're franchised to, I don't know. I'm kind of crazy with that stuff, but, you know, because
that would be very interesting.
People want to see the best of the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, they pay a huge amount of money, but you know, they're just a superpower on the field, off the field, financially. They are dictating, they're bossing.
In fact, they're massive. I mean, 1 billion people.
Them, you know?
1 billion people. Obviously, they will definitely have. So, any country that actually plays against India, they know it's payday when they tour your country. So, yeah, we talk about cricket with the good pastor. He's very versatile, as you would see. But thank you so much, Pastor, for making time for us so early in the morning, coming clad and looking sharp. Please do enjoy the rest of Women's Month. Continue impacting on young men and grown men like us to make sure that we stay on the path and make sure that we take good care of these precious beings called women.
Konapo, ipapo, ipapo.